Christmas. Are you ready to tell the Christmas stories? It's one of the traditions that I love about Christmas is not only hearing again the story of Jesus coming, bringing hope to the world, being born as a child into a fallen world, but when we gather around as families, we tell those old Christmas stories. My grandmother has this lemon meringue pie story, and we tell the story of my brother opening this present and just bursting into tears because the present was actually meant for my sister. But we tell stories, and I want to tell you a story of Christmas past. It's 1865 in Jerusalem, and there's a pastor there who's very tired. And he gets on a horse and he rides to Bethlehem on Christmas Eve. But let's go back even further into 1865. That's December of 1865. In April of 1865, the Civil War is ending. It was one of the most divisive, bloody, life and death conflagrations the United States has ever known. And Philip Brooks was an Episcopal priest in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia was a strange place during the Civil War. On one side of town, you had the place where young soldiers would come in and get their uniforms and their weapons for the Union Army. And on the other side of Philadelphia were two of the biggest military hospitals during the Civil War. So you had young guys coming in, getting outfitted and going to war, and then you had other guys coming back broken and wounded and needing healing. And Brooks was a pastor in the middle of all of this. He was anti-slavery and very much hoping for one outcome in the war. And he would go out to the African-American troops that were camped outside of Philly and minister the gospel to them. He was a great Sunday preacher, but his heart was evangelism. He was such a great preacher. He was the one that was picked to eulogize Abraham Lincoln in Philadelphia's memorial after Lincoln was assassinated. But his heart was always evangelism. So now it's December in 1865, and he's leaving Jerusalem. Think about Palestine at that time. Modern day Israel does not exist yet. It's very rural. He rides on horseback towards Bethlehem. And when he gets to the place where the shepherds traditionally is known for them to have heard peace on earth, goodwill towards men. Can you imagine how that verse ministered to his heart on that night? And it's almost midnight, and he's looking out, and he sees a few twinkling lights in Bethlehem. And he's very moved. And he's a good pastor, and he had been meditating in that prophecy in Micah 5 that reads like this: "But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be the ruler over Israel, whose origins are of old, from ancient times." So it's this prophecy of this shepherd king coming, but he's going to be born in Bethlehem, this small town outside of the big metropolis where everything's really happening. And Brooks remembers that. Now it's 1868, and his shepherd's heart, his evangelistic heart, wants to write something for his Sunday school kids to sing on Christmas Eve, and he wants to sort of channel and bring back that feeling that he had that evening looking over Bethlehem on that cold night in December. And so he starts to write, and he really felt like this, it brought it all back. And he wrote, "O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Above thy deep and dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by. Yet in thy dark street shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight." So he brings in the poem in this great way. The hopes and fears of Israel, there's been 400 silent years. And so Israel's great hope was this ruler that was going to come out of Bethlehem. And the hopes and fears of all the years were met in him that night. The hope and the fears at the end of this horrible time in the United States. And I think that's why those words carry so much significance with us, is because every Christmas we come with our hopes and we come with our fears. And are they going to be met in Jesus? So he gives this poem to his organist and says, can you write music for it? And the organist just can't come up with anything until December 23rd. He's in bed and he gets woken up. He feels like by an angel muse, and the music just comes to him. So he jumps up, he writes it down, and then he gives it to Brooks the next day, who has to get his Sunday school kids on Christmas Eve morning to practice for the Christmas Eve service. But he really wanted to communicate the gospel to those kids in this song. And he writes in the third and fourth verse, because we hardly ever get to those, when this song is playing in the mall, or even when we sing it at church. The third verse says, how silently, the wondrous gift is given. So God imparts to human hearts the blessings of his heaven. No ear may hear his coming, but in this world of sin, where meek souls will receive him still, the dear Christ enters in. Are you a meek soul? That means you're not going to argue with God. Has Christ entered into you? He wants to. O holy child of Bethlehem, descend to us, we pray. Cast out our sin and enter in. Be born in us today. We hear the Christmas angels. Can you hear them? They're still singing. The great glad tidings tell. O come to us, abide with us. O Lord Emmanuel, God with us, abide with us. This Christmas, sing the whole song. Picture that place and allow Jesus into your heart. Merry Christmas.
Oh, little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie above thy deep and the silent stars go by. Yet